My name is Daniel Carter. I am 29 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have lived quietly in the shadow of my older brother, Ethan Carter, who is always praised as the smart one, the confident one, the successful one, while I remained the invisible one who worked hard but was rarely noticed. From childhood to college, relatives, teachers, and even our parents compared me to him, and slowly I learned to stay silent and accept that he would always stand in front while I stood behind. When we both joined Brightcore Solutions in Chicago, him in marketing and me as a product analyst, I believed things might finally be different because my managers appreciated my skills and my reports, and for the first time in my life, I felt valued. But that feeling didn't last long because Ethan soon realized that my ideas were powerful and began quietly using them as his own. It started with small moments, like when I shared my churn prediction model with him and weeks later heard him present the same idea in a meeting as if it were his creation. And although my heart sank, I said nothing because he was my brother and I didn't want to create conflict in the family. Over time, my silence became a habit, and more of my work, strategies, dashboards, presentations, and solutions, was slowly absorbed into his growing reputation. While at home, our parents praised him as a natural leader and barely asked about my role, assuming I was only helping him succeed. The real betrayal came with Project Orion, the company's most important contract, overseen directly by CEO Richard Hale, when Ethan's team failed and he secretly called me late at night asking for help. And despite everything, I went because I still cared about him. For weeks, I worked after midnight, on weekends, and in complete secrecy, rebuilding the entire system from scratch, designing a powerful predictive engine, testing it repeatedly, and finally achieving near-perfect accuracy. And when Ethan saw the results, he thanked me and promised he would never forget what I had done. But on presentation day, as I watched the live stream from my desk because I wasn't even invited to the executive meeting, I saw him walk in confidently in his suit, smile at the executives, and present every chart, every insight, and every solution that I had created as if it were his own, never once mentioning my name, and with every slide my years of swallowed pain turned into anger. Then, at the end, when CEO Richard Hale leaned forward and asked who had designed the predictive engine behind the system, the room went silent, and without hesitation, Ethan looked straight at him and said, "I did." And in that moment, hearing my own work stolen so openly, I realized that my brother had crossed the final line. My silence had finally reached its limit, and nothing in my life would ever be the same again. After Ethan confidently told the CEO that he had designed the predictive engine himself, I sat frozen at my desk, staring at the screen as if my body had forgotten how to move. Because in that single sentence, he had erased months of my work and years of silent loyalty. And while the executives nodded and praised his brilliance, something inside me finally broke. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt determined, because I knew the truth was documented in every line of code, every file history, every timestamp, and every late-night email I had sent him asking for feedback. That evening, instead of going home, I stayed in the office long after everyone left and began gathering proof, opening project folders, downloading version histories, saving commit logs, collecting design drafts, and screenshotting messages where Ethan had asked me for help and thanked me for saving the project. And with every piece of evidence, my confidence slowly returned. The next morning, I requested a private meeting with Mr. Lewis, my manager, and although my hands trembled, my voice remained calm as I showed him the documents and explained how the system had really been built. And as he scrolled through the files, his expression changed from doubt to shock to quiet anger. He didn't interrupt me, and when I finished, he simply said, "Daniel, this is serious," before promising to take the matter directly to the executive board. Over the next few days, whispers spread through the office, meetings were held behind closed doors, and Ethan suddenly stopped making eye contact with me, sensing that something was wrong even though he didn't yet know what. Then one afternoon, I received an unexpected email requesting my presence in the main conference room, and when I walked in, I found the CEO, the HR director, my manager, and two senior executives already seated, while Ethan sat stiffly at the far end of the table, his confident smile completely gone. Richard Hale looked at me steadily and asked me to explain my role in Project Orion. And this time, I spoke without fear, describing every stage of the development process, every challenge I had solved, and every night I had worked in silence, while screens behind me displayed my files, timestamps, and records proving my words. As the evidence unfolded, the room grew heavier, and Ethan's face slowly turned pale as he realized there was no way to deny the truth. And when the CEO finally turned to him and asked quietly, "Do you have anything to say?" Ethan opened his mouth but couldn't find a single honest answer. And in that moment, I understood that the brother who had always stood in front of me was finally exposed. And for the first time in my life, I was no longer invisible. The silence in the conference room after Ethan failed to defend himself felt heavier than any argument. And as Richard Hale slowly closed the folder of evidence and looked around the table, I could sense that years of deception were collapsing in front of everyone's eyes. Because in that moment, it was no longer about one stolen project, but about trust, integrity, and character. The CEO thanked me calmly for my honesty and asked me to wait outside while the executives discussed the matter privately. And as I walked into the hallway, my legs felt weak, not from fear but from emotional exhaustion, because standing up for myself had taken more strength than I ever imagined. 20 minutes later, I was called back in, and this time the atmosphere had completely changed, as Richard Hale announced that an internal investigation had confirmed my ownership of the project, and that I would be officially recognized as the lead architect of Project Orion, while Ethan would be placed under disciplinary review for misrepresentation and ethical violations. Hearing those words felt unreal, as if someone had finally corrected a story that had been wrong my entire life. And when the CEO shook my hand and thanked me for my dedication, I felt something inside me heal that I didn't even know was broken. Ethan avoided my eyes as HR explained the consequences to him, including loss of leadership opportunities and possible termination. And although part of me expected to feel victorious, what I actually felt was sadness, because despite everything, he was still my brother, and watching him fall because of his own choices was painful. In the days that followed, my name appeared on official reports, company newsletters, and internal announcements recognizing my contribution, and coworkers who had barely noticed me before suddenly stopped by my desk to congratulate me, apologize, and ask for my opinion, while managers began inviting me to strategic meetings and trusting me with major responsibilities. At home, when our parents finally learned the truth, they were shocked into silence, realizing that for years they had praised the wrong person while overlooking the one who had quietly carried the weight. And although they tried to explain themselves, I didn't argue, because I had learned that validation earned through honesty means more than validation begged for. Meanwhile, Ethan grew distant and withdrawn, struggling to accept that his image had been built on borrowed work. And one evening he finally called me, his voice tired and uncertain, and admitted that he had been afraid of being ordinary and had used my talent to protect his reputation. And although his apology couldn't erase the past, it was the first time he had ever spoken to me as an equal. Standing in my apartment that night, looking out at the city lights, I realized that success wasn't about revenge or public recognition, but about reclaiming your voice, trusting your worth, and never again allowing anyone, even family, to define your value for you. After the investigation ended, and my role in Project Orion was officially recognized, my life began to change in quiet but powerful ways, because instead of chasing approval, I was now being trusted with real responsibility, invited into high-level strategy meetings, consulted on major decisions, and given the freedom to lead projects in my own way. And with every passing week, my confidence grew stronger, not from praise but from the knowledge that I had earned my place honestly. Brightcore offered me a senior architect position along with a significant raise and equity in the company. And when I signed the contract, I thought about all the nights I had worked alone while others slept, realizing that persistence had finally spoken louder than popularity. My relationship with Ethan remained complicated, as he slowly rebuilt his career in a different department with humility instead of arrogance. And although we were no longer close, we learned to respect each other without competition, understanding that brotherhood did not mean sacrificing integrity. At home, our parents began listening more carefully, asking about my work, and acknowledging the mistakes they had made by always assuming Ethan was the stronger one. And while their regret came late, I accepted it not because I needed it, but because holding resentment would only chain me to the past. Months later, when Project Orion won international recognition and brought massive growth to Brightcore, the CEO publicly credited me during a company-wide event, calling my journey an example of quiet excellence and resilience. And as hundreds of employees applauded, I felt a calm pride rather than excitement, knowing that my real victory was learning to speak up without anger and stand firm without cruelty. Outside of work, I began mentoring younger analysts who reminded me of my former self, talented but hesitant, and I made sure to teach them that their ideas deserved space and their voices deserved respect, because no one should have to wait years to be seen. One evening, while walking home through the glowing streets of Chicago, I reflected on how my story had never been about defeating my brother, but about breaking free from invisibility, reclaiming my identity, and proving to myself that integrity is the strongest form of success. And in that peaceful realization, I understood that sometimes the greatest achievement isn't having your name called in front of everyone, but finally believing it deserves to be called at all.